The resort shimmered like a promise kept. Pale stone gleamed beneath the afternoon sun, glass walls reflecting the sea in soft blue fragments, the air scented faintly with salt and citrus. Everything about the place whispered discretion, wealth, and control. Problems were meant to dissolve here, buried beneath linen sheets and ocean views. Elena stood behind the reception desk, composed and still, her fingers resting lightly on the marble surface. Her posture was elegant without effort, her presence quiet but commanding. Years ago, she had learned how to hold herself this way. Back then, stillness had been survival. Now it was power. The door slid open. Laughter drifted in first, familiar, male, careless. Elena felt it before she saw him. The sound carried memory, sharp and unwelcome, slicing through the calm she had perfected. She lifted her eyes slowly, already knowing. Mateo walked in as though the world owed him space. Sunglasses still on, shoulders relaxed, confidence draped over him like a well-worn jacket. Time had been kind to him. Or maybe it had simply spared him the kind of pain that carved depth into people. Beside him stood a woman Elena did not recognize at first, young and radiant, her hand looped possessively through his arm. Isabel. The mistress had a name now. They paused just inside the lobby, taking in the scale of the place. Isabel gasped softly, delight dancing across her face. Mateo smirked, clearly pleased with himself, as though the luxury around him was an extension of his own worth. Elena watched without blinking. He did not recognize her. Not immediately. That surprised her, though it shouldn't have. Years change faces. Well, pain reshapes bone and expression. Success smooths what sorrow once sharpened. The woman he had left behind had been smaller then, quieter, weighed down by grief and unanswered questions. That woman no longer existed. Mateo approached the desk, pulling off his sunglasses as he did. His eyes met Elena's. He froze. It was subtle. A fraction of a second where his body hesitated, where instinct overrode arrogance. Confusion flickered across his face, quickly masked by a practiced smile. Isabel remained unaware, already distracted by the opulence of the lobby, her gaze darting toward the chandeliers, the sweeping staircase, the attentive staff. Elena smiled first. Welcome to Mar Azul Resort. May I have your reservation name, sir? Her voice was calm, warm, professionally pleasant. Perfectly neutral. She watched his eyes search her face, trying to place her, trying to explain the discomfort curling in his chest. Mateo Reyes, he said, clearing his throat. The name echoed in her mind, heavy with history. Elena typed it into the system with steady hands, the rhythm of her movements betraying nothing. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in silence, though she had never expected it to arrive so cleanly, so effortlessly. She looked up again, holding his gaze a second longer than necessary. Hope you enjoy your stay, sir. The words were ordinary, polite, harmless. Yet something about them unsettled him. Mateo shifted his weight, glancing briefly at Isabel, then back at Elena. His smile faltered. Isabel leaned closer, her voice bright. This place is stunning. You really outdid yourself with this one. Mateo nodded absently, still watching Elena. Yes. It looks impressive. Elena inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the compliment as though it belonged to the resort rather than to her. She signaled to a nearby attendant with a subtle motion. Instantly, the staff responded. Luggage was collected, keys were prepared. Every movement around her flowed through her approval. Isabel noticed. Her brows furrowed slightly as she watched the staff defer to Elena with unmistakable respect. She glanced between Elena and Mateo, curiosity stirring. Your suite is ready, Elena said smoothly. Ocean view, private terrace. If you need anything during your stay, please let us know. She slid the key cards across the desk. Mateo hesitated before taking them, his fingers brushing the marble surface as though grounding himself. There was something familiar about her eyes, something that tugged at a memory he could not quite grasp. Have we met before? He asked suddenly. Elena met his gaze evenly. Many guests feel that way, sir. The answer was effortless, true enough to disarm him, vague enough to deny him certainty. Isabel laughed lightly. You're imagining things. Come on. She tugged at his arm, eager to explore. Mateo allowed himself to be pulled away, though his eyes lingered on Elena as they turned toward the elevators. Elena watched them go, her expression unchanged. Only when the doors closed behind them did she exhale, slow and measured. Around her, the resort continued its quiet rhythm. Guests arrived, staff moved, the world flowed on, unaware that something irreversible had just begun. Elena straightened a stack of papers on the desk, her reflection faintly visible in the polished marble. She studied it for a moment, not with vanity, but with recognition. She had survived. She had built something solid, something hers. And now, fate had delivered him back into her world, right where she wanted him. The morning sun spilled across the terrace, turning the ocean into liquid gold. Mateo and Isabel stepped out of their suite, champagne glasses in hand, the breeze tousling their hair as they marveled at the view. Everything was perfection. Every detail screamed luxury and indulgence. For Isabel, this was a dream. For Mateo, it was an opportunity to flaunt his life once more. Neither noticed the faint hum of movement beneath the balcony, the quiet organization of a staff that answered only to Elena. Elena had watched them leave, her expression unreadable. Behind her calm exterior, she had already set the pieces into motion. At every room, every service, every itinerary had been carefully curated to reflect control and subtle authority. Nothing was accidental. The resort was her kingdom, and Mateo had entered it believing himself untouchable. He greeted staff with the casual arrogance of someone used to being obeyed. He assumed everyone deferred to him. That assumption dissolved almost immediately. Every greeting from the staff included a subtle acknowledgement to Elena. Every question was answered only after consultation with her. Mateo noticed none of it. He assumed efficiency, not hierarchy. Isabel's laughter carried across the terrace as she leaned into Mateo, pointing toward a glass-bottom pool far below. "This place is unreal," she said, eyes wide with wonder. Mateo nodded absently, distracted. Yet he had a strange sense of disquiet nagging at him, a feeling he could not name. There was something familiar about the way the staff moved, the way their eyes occasionally flicked toward the lobby. He brushed it off as his imagination. Meanwhile, Elena made her rounds in the shadows. Not a single guest nor staff member crossed her path without acknowledgement, subtle or otherwise. She moved with an elegance that seemed effortless, though every action was calculated. She had spent years rebuilding herself, and every detail of this resort was a testament to her resilience. It was more than luxury, it was a statement. Isabel was the first to notice the resemblance. As they passed a mirrored wall in the lobby, her eyes lingered on Elena standing behind the reception desk, signing off on some delivery with quiet authority. That posture, that expression, it was uncannily familiar. Isabel tilted her head, curiosity sparking in her gaze. Mateo, still caught up in his own satisfaction, paid little attention. Later, as they settled for lunch at the terrace restaurant, Isabel's curiosity grew. She leaned closer to Mateo, whispering, "Do you feel like you've seen her before?" Mateo laughed dismissively. "Probably one of the managers," he said. But even as he spoke, he couldn't entirely suppress the flicker of uncertainty in his chest. Elena moved among the tables, checking service, nodding to the chefs, her eyes scanning the room with quiet vigilance. She did not look at them. She looked through them. Mateo tried to enjoy himself, yet unease crept steadily into his confidence. Each interaction with Elena felt oddly layered, subtly demanding attention, asserting authority. He brushed it off. He had power here, money here. He was in control. And yet the recognition haunted him, a whisper at the edge of memory he could not chase. As the afternoon wore on, Elena orchestrated a small mistake in their itinerary, a delay with the private boat reserved for them. Isabel complained softly, but Mateo, flustered by the unfamiliar minor inconvenience, realized that it was unusual for staff to hesitate. The delay was perfectly harmless, yet it unsettled him more than it should have. Elena appeared in the distance, calm, composed, watching the resolution without lifting a finger herself. She let the moment stretch just enough to allow doubt to settle in his mind. Finally, Isabel could not contain her curiosity. As they returned to the suite to change for dinner, she tugged Mateo aside. "I think the owner, she looks exactly like someone I've seen before," she whispered, eyes wide. Mateo's brow furrowed. "Who?" he asked, attempting nonchalance. Isabel hesitated, glancing toward the lobby. I'm not sure, but she feels familiar. There's something about her. Mateo's chest tightened. The words lodged in his mind, persistent and uncomfortable. He laughed nervously, though his laughter lacked its usual certainty. You're imagining things, boy, he said, but he couldn't quite shake the feeling. Elena observed them from her office across the property, unobserved herself. She allowed them a window into discovery, letting the tension build naturally. There was no rush. The realization, when it came, would be devastating precisely because they believed themselves safe. She had waited years for this moment. And she understood that the small, patient manipulations of today would create the perfect storm tomorrow. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of pink and violet, Mateo lingered on the balcony, glasses untouched. A part of him wrestled with an unnameable discomfort, a sense that the resort, flawless though it was, had been arranged with intention. Isabel remained oblivious, laughing, leaning into his arm. But Mateo could no longer ignore the feeling that the woman in the lobby, moving with quiet, precise authority, was not simply a manager. Something about her was intimately familiar, uncomfortably so. Elena watched them, her face a mask of serene composure. Inside, she felt the quiet satisfaction of a plan unfolding exactly as she had envisioned. Every glance, every motion, every unspoken recognition built toward the inevitable truth. And when Mateo finally saw her for what she was, he would understand fully that the world had shifted beneath his feet, and the woman he once abandoned now held all the power. The day faded into twilight, the sky glowing faintly over the horizon. Mateo and Isabel retired to their suite, still unaware of the identity that had been subtly asserted over every moment of their stay. Elena retreated to her office, reviewing the next steps, each one meticulously designed. The storm had not yet broken, but the first winds were stirring. By the time the evening concluded, nothing would remain as it had been. The evening settled over the resort like a velvet curtain, the lights soft and golden, reflecting off the calm water of the infinity pool. Yet Mateo and Isabel had returned to their suite after a day that, in his mind, had felt unusually tense. He tried to shake it off, sipping a glass of wine, but a nagging awareness clung to him. Elena's presence, the staff's subtle deference, the perfection of every detail, it all pressed against him, quietly accusing, without a single word spoken. Isabel leaned back on the chaise lounge, her laughter light, but Mateo noticed it rang hollow tonight. She glanced at him, trying to catch his eye. He forced a smile, nodded, but even he could feel the fracture forming in their easy companionship. Mateo was aware of something he couldn't yet name, a familiarity in the way Elena moved through the resort that gnawed at the edges of memory. When the elevator chimed, he stiffened. Elena stepped out, her posture as immaculate as ever, as a calm smile resting on her lips. She carried herself with that quiet authority that never screamed, but always commanded attention. Mateo's pulse quickened despite himself. This was not merely a manager making rounds. Her gaze swept the suite briefly before landing squarely on him. Good evening, sir, she said, her voice soft, even, professional. I trust your day has been comfortable? Mateo hesitated, wine glass trembling slightly in his hand. He wanted to respond with the casual ease he always wielded, but the words stuck somewhere between fear and disbelief. Yes, it's been perfect, he managed, his voice tighter than intended. Isabel tilted her head, finally noticing the tension in his face. Who is this woman? She asked softly. Mateo shook his head, trying to mask the unease. Just a manager, he said, though the lie sounded hollow to him even as he spoke. Elena nodded politely. I'm glad everything meets your expectations, she said, placing a small folder on the table before stepping back. It contains the itinerary for tomorrow's activities and some personalized recommendations. If there is anything else you require, I am available at any time. Mateo opened the folder, flipping through the pages, only vaguely registering the details. His mind was elsewhere. He studied Elena's hands, the precise movements, the calm assurance. Every detail screamed control, elegance, and something more, something familiar. He had known this posture, this confidence once. He had dismissed it then. He could not dismiss it now. Isabel, oblivious at first, leaned forward, skimming the itinerary. She looked up at Elena, curiosity finally prying into suspicion. The resemblance was uncanny. Mateo, unable to contain himself, finally said, "Who are you really?" His voice cracked slightly, betraying the dread he had been fighting all day. Elena's smile remained serene. "I am the owner," she said simply. "Everything you see, every service, every detail is under my direction." Mateo's knees felt weak. The wine glass slipped from his fingers and hit the marble floor with a sharp clink, splattering red across the cream tiles. Isabel gasped, stepping back, clutching his arm. Mateo's eyes finally met Elena's without defiance, without arrogance. Recognition exploded in him in a single, terrifying instant. It was her, Elena, the woman he had abandoned. He opened his mouth to speak, to apologize, to explain, but the words were swallowed by the weight of realization. She had rebuilt, succeeded, and remained unbroken. She had thrived, and he had walked in thinking himself untouchable. Elena remained calm, letting the silence stretch between them. She did not lecture, she did not rage. She allowed the moment to speak for itself. Mateo's guilt, his fear, and the recognition of his own failings became his punishment. Isabel's face paled as she pieced it together. She stepped back from Mateo, disbelief and fear in her eyes. Mateo had no defense. The mistress who had once believed herself untouchable now saw the true power in the woman she had dismissed as a memory. Elena walked around the table slowly, each step measured, commanding, yet graceful. "You have entered my world," she said quietly, every word deliberate. "You have been my guest, that is all." Mateo tried to speak again, but the words failed. Isabel, shaking her head, whispered, I had no idea." She turned to him, her loyalty dissolving in the light of truth. He tried to reach for her, but she stepped back, leaving him exposed and alone, the weight of shame settling on his shoulders. Elena returned to the desk, gesturing to the staff to prepare the checkout for the following morning. There was no malice in her movements, no desire for vengeance. This was not about revenge, this was about freedom, clarity, and control. The woman he had underestimated had reclaimed her world, he had merely stumbled into it. As the night deepened, Mateo sat on the edge of the bed, silent, broken, and contemplative. Isabel had withdrawn into the bathroom, refusing to speak. The room, once full of excitement and indulgence, now echoed with absence and regret. Every opulent detail of the suite, every thoughtful arrangement, all reminded him that he was no longer the architect of his own life. Elena stood in the lobby, observing from a distance as the resort settled for the night. The lights reflected softly on the water, the staff moved with precision, and the world outside remained oblivious to the private reckoning that had just unfolded. She allowed herself a small inward smile. Her plan had succeeded without drama or chaos. She had rebuilt herself, claimed her authority, and finally faced the man who had once dismissed her. The next morning, the checkout proceeded with quiet efficiency. Mateo and Isabel departed without fanfare, the experience etched into memory with a clarity he could never forget. Elena watched them leave, her face still calm, her posture perfect. She had achieved closure without compromising her dignity. The resort, her sanctuary, remained intact, a testament to her resilience and foresight. Alone in her office, Elena allowed herself a deep breath, finally releasing the tension that had lingered for years. Outside, the waves lapped gently at the shore. The day had ended, and she had emerged whole, in control, and free. Mateo had left, stripped of his arrogance and illusions. She remained, the quiet victor, unshaken, her world perfectly hers. The storm had passed, and for